Joining me now is Florida Republican Congressman Byron Donalds, whose name has been reportedly on a short list for possible vice presidential picks for the former president. Congressman Donalds, I appreciate your being with here. Let me get right to that news. Your colleagues on the House Judiciary's Weaponization Committee are demanding Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg and prosecutor Matthew Colangelo testify in 2 weeks. Is it the place of Congress to be looking into state jury verdicts?
First of all, it's good to be with you. Number one, absolutely it is. We do send federal funds to local jurisdictions all across the country. Number two, it's Alvin Bragg who decided to reach into the federal jurisdiction in order to make these misdemeanors felonies. You got to remember the core of this argument is that is dealing with the federal election of 2016. That is not the jurisdiction of a state prosecutor in Lower Manhattan. That is the jurisdiction of the Federal Election Commission, a federal election commission, by the way, that looked at this in 2018 and said there was nothing here.
But let me push back on that if I can. This case obviously was indicted by a state grand jury. It was decided by a Manhattan jury. The appeals process hasn't played out. Why not allow the appeals process, the way our system works, to be completed?
Because you got to understand, and let's just be real about this, the entire reason why these charges were brought now, why this case was brought now, was to interfere with the 2024 presidential election. It was to interfere. It was to trap Donald Trump in the courtroom.
Well,
that's the entire purpose.
No evidence that Joe Biden had any
knows,
involvement, obviously.
Are you going to let me finish, or are you going to talk over me?
No, I just wanted to make that pushback. I'm glad to listen.
You want to talk? Okay, let me talk. Here's the deal. Everybody knows that the appeals process is going to go well into 2025 after the election is over. Say what you will about the merits of the case. We have never in American history had prosecutions of the leading presidential candidate of any major party in the United States. This has never happened. So much so that Maine Justice, their own protocols are that they don't do this in the heat of a presidential election. But what we have seen out of the Department of Justice led by Merrick Garland, out of Alvin Bragg in Lower Manhattan, out of Fannie Willis in Georgia, is that they do not care about the norms of our election process.
They just want to get Donald Trump.
So the Weaponization Committee does have a responsibility to investigate.
So respectfully, let me push back for a second, because it's the same Justice Department that you say has weaponized this right now, that as we speak is prosecuting the Democratic Senator from New Jersey, Robert Menendez. They're pursuing a case against the Democratic representative from Texas, Henry Cuellar. And beginning on Monday, they're going to be pursuing the start of a trial against the president's own son, Hunter Biden, on a gun charge. So how can it be both ways, where they're only pursuing this as a way to weaponize it when they're pursuing Democrats and Republicans?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. First of all, Bob Menendez, he had gold bars with his name engraved on them, and Bob Menendez is not running for president of the United States. Number two, Henry Cuellar is not running for president of the United States.
So it only matters because he's running for president of the United States. It doesn't matter below that highest office?
Of course, because you're interfering with a presidential election.
But what evidence is there that Joe Biden
you're
doesn't have any
interfering
control
with the presidential election? That's the issue here.
Joe Biden doesn't have any control over what the Manhattan DA does.
Matthew Colangelo was the number 3 guy at Maine Justice under Merrick Garland, who works for Joe Biden. He left there to go be a frontline prosecutor in Lower Manhattan. I mean, look, that right there demonstrates that you have some semblance of collusion, because never in the legal system, according to my knowledge, have you had somebody working at Maine Justice in the number 3 position leave to go be a frontline prosecutor on a case in New York City. Just happens to be the case of a former president who is the chief political rival of Joe Biden. So this stinks to high heaven. Everybody knows it stinks to high heaven, because this is election interference, and it is a political persecution of Joe Biden's political rival.
If President Trump wins his appeal, will you support that verdict?
Of course, because this case should have never been brought in the first place.
So if he loses his appeal, will you support that then?
This case should have never been brought in.
You said you'll support it if he wins it, but you won't support it if he loses. I just want to be clear.
Oh, my gosh. You going to let me talk? Let me answer your question. You are talking about a federal crime. that is never actually decided by the Federal Election Commission. They looked into this and they said there's nothing to see here. Alvin Bragg pulls it up as a state prosecutor outside of his jurisdiction and ties in some bookmaking charge that is long since past long past since when that charge was no longer allowed to be utilized in state court, all to twist it together in a legal theory to get felony convictions. Come on, man. This case is a joke. You know it. I know it. The American people know it. Because the American people have watched their cities be overrun by illegal aliens, which is a violation of federal immigration law. Joe Biden doesn't care. They've watched the price of everything in their home go up drastically because of Joe Biden's reckless spending, not caring about the welfare of the American people.
Why is that retribution? Isn't that policy differences? Sorry to interrupt you.
They watched 13 men and women die at Hamid Karzai International Airport, and when the bodies came back from Afghanistan, Joe Biden was busy looking at his watch, not caring about the disaster he caused on the withdrawal of Afghanistan. So, yes, the American people have had enough. They want to fire Joe Biden, and they have every right to do so.
Let me ask you about your Republican colleague, J.D. Vance. He suggested that the daughter of Judge Juan Merchan should be subpoenaed. Should family members of public officials be considered fair game, Congressman?
If you're talking about the fact that the daughter of Judge Merchan is making millions of dollars helping Democrats raise money online, and that very fact has caused her dad to have a vested interest in supporting a conviction of President Trump, then yes, she should. Because her influence with her father is one of the core reasons why I believe this case is going to be overturned. And because Juan Merchan, under New York state ethics, should have recused himself because he has a bias against Donald Trump.
And to be clear, by that same logic, then, isn't the backlash against Justices Alito and Clarence Thomas for the actions of their wives reasonable?
As far as I remember, Justice Alito's wife flew a flag. That's not making money. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, it's not a question about whether she flew a flag or not. She flew multiple flags. One of them is associated with Christian nationalism.
Flying
Another
a flag
one's not
is not
just a
making
signal
money,
of distress,
sir.
but as you
Flying
know,
a
in both
flag is
cases,
allowed in the United States of America.
Sir, let me just
that
finish.
is
We'll each
free
get a chance to
speech.
talk.
What you're trying to do is weaponize this stuff against
let me just
Judge
ask the
Alito.
question, then you can answer.
Sorry,
I'm glad to listen. To be clear, she flew two flags, both of which were associated with January 6th rioters at the Capitol. So in much the same way, whether there's money involved or not, doesn't that also potentially affect the position of, in this case, her husband, and in the other cases, you say, the daughter of a judge?
No, it does not, and you know better than that. You're allowed to fly a flag like you're allowed to speak your mind. That does not mean that the judge is all of a sudden is tainted, but when the family is making money off of the actual trial that Judge Merchan is dealing with right now, that is an ethical issue, and he should have recused himself before the trial even started.
We'll let viewers make their own judgment. Congressman Byron Donalds, I appreciate your conversation. Apologize for any interruptions. It's important that we answer these questions. Thanks for making time to speak with me.